my voice will come up, it'll come up on the recording. Are you ready to start, man?
Yeah, I guess you all knew that Rabbi Handel was not coming, and Rabbi Yechiel Zeev was going to replace him, and we'll start at chapter 5, because that's kind of where we left off.
I should say I'm grateful for the Orbox for hosting the shir, first and foremost. It's Orbach, right? Orbach, right?
Yeah.
I apologize to everybody for the condition of my voice. It's not something I would have wanted.
Well, can I apologize to you for the condition of my ears?
It's not your ears, it's my voice.
Okay. Okay, that's it.
It's getting to turn out to be a bad Jewish joke. Okay.
We don't have in mind for Shalema, the scoop that we're learning today, for Chaim Yonatan Mordechai ben Pesia Elka.
Is that Chalev?
Huh?
Little boy who's very sick.
So I understand that, and I do. You've been learning it for 3 months, and I'm only learning it for 2, I think. But ultimately, the whole entire book of the Tanya is trying to describe the relationship between the world and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and trying to help us understand how our involvement affects that relationship. He was talking about in chapter 4 how there's something which is already mentioned in the Rambam and the Moreh Nevuchim, that the mind, the one who knows, and the thing which it knows is one and the same. So it's an idea which is already mentioned in the Rishonim and the Moreh Nevuchim, which Lahavdil has already spoken about it in Greek philosophy. The idea ultimately is that a person's connection to something intellectually is the deepest connection that he could have, because his mind, when he knows something, interacts with that thing in a way that it wouldn't interact otherwise. Because when you know something, just knowing that this tea is here, for that matter. So now the idea that the tea is here on the table is now in my mind. And that means that the tea is in my mind. That's very abstract conceptually. But the notion that the tea is on the table, and the existence of the tea on the table, and the fact that the tea being on the table is now something which I conceive of, that means my mind is now connected to the tea on the table. We'll start chapter 5 together. If I'm moving too fast or too slow, please feel free to give me your input. I'm a guest here. Well, the Tosefos bear hativ, and to give an additional, deeper understanding, better understanding of the language of tfisa. So he was talking about in chapter 4, how tfisa means that you grasp something, and your mind's grasping something. It's interacting with the thing that it's grasping. And the word tfisa is mentioned already in the Zohar. He says, Sha'amar Eliyahu. Over here he's talking about Eliyahu. He means the part of the Zohar which is called the Patach Eliyahu. The Sephardim Minyanim say this before Mencha. It's called Patach Eliyahu. And it's a piece of the Zohar which Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is quoting from Eliyahu HaNavi. And over there it says the words, amongst many others, but the ones that he's going to focus on is Les machshava tfisa bach, that a mind can have no grasp of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is somebody, something which we can't know, which is something already obviously explored in the Rambam and the Moreh Nevuchim. The Rambam and the Moreh Nevuchim pretty much establishes, and it's not something which is disputed by any of his contemporaries or anybody after, but everything that the Torah describes God to be is only according to our conception. They call it, I think, negative theology, which ultimately means that we're only describing negatively in the sense that we can only describe what he's not, because we can only describe the things that can't possibly be God-like. But to give a positive definition of God, we can't possibly do that, because to do that would mean we have to grasp him. And we can't grasp him. And that's what the Eliyahu HaNavi is saying, Les machshava tfisa bach kalal. Yinei kol seichel, every intellect, kisha maskil, when it comes to know, umasig, and realizes besichla, with the intellect, eza muskal, something which it comes to know, which basically means anything, any idea or anything which the mind comes to know. When we're talking about coming to know it, we mean understanding it, not just of its existence, but the fact that we are masig it. He adds in the word masig, that comes to mean that we realize it. That means we have an understanding of the thing. I lost the place. Harei Seichel Teifes es hamuskal, the intellect grasps the object of what it's intellectualizing, umakifay, and surrounds it besichle, with the intellect, with the mind. So he's telling you that what's taking place intellectually is that now your mind is surrounding the object. An object could be in a concept as well, obviously. It's even better understood when you think about it conceptually. It surrounds the idea that it's conceptualizing. Umakifay besichle v'hamuskal nitfas umukaf umelubash b'seicha seichel. And then the object of understanding, which is being understood by the mind, which is coming to understand it, is now surrounded and garbed within that intellect. Hello.
Sorry for being late.
Please have a seat.
Shehisigo, that realized v'hiskilo, and came to know. V'gam ha'seichel melubash b'muskal b'shasha masigo. And now the mind is also garbed, clothed, dressed in the idea which it came to know at the time that it understands it, v'tofso b'sichlo, and grasps it in its mind. So obviously he's using language over here which is very difficult to digest. The idea that our mind is clothing itself with the idea, and the idea is being clothed by the mind. But ultimately, he's going to give a mashal in 1 minute, but just use, again, sometimes when, not sometimes, many times when Svarim, whether it's Chassidish Svarim or any other book for that matter, uses certain words, you have to know the way the author understands that word himself and how he's using it until before you can even get a grasp of what he's talking about. So you have to play with the words in your own mind without attempting to understand it too rigidly or specifically with your prior knowledge, because if not, you're never going to really be understanding the author's intent. So let's just play with the idea of clothing, just like clothing is somehow attached and becomes part of a body and it dresses up the body. So too your mind, when a concept enters it, now your mind is garbed in that concept. A person could even close their mind and even experience it. They could experience their own mind being dressed, so to speak, being clothed, so to speak, in whatever concept they're thinking about. You could actually intimate it yourself when you think about it. But either way, he brings a mashal. Derech mashal k'sha'adam mevin u'masig.
Hey, okay, what do you mean by a mashal?
A mashal is a parable. A mashal is a simple story or a more concrete example that helps us, facilitates our understanding of something deeper.
Different from a midrash in what way?
A medrash is a Talmudic explanation of something. A mashal is a parable, literally a parable, but ultimately it's a concrete example that allows us to understand something which is more conceptual and abstract.
Okay. An analogy, where it's analogous to. Okay.
A reader's aid, an aid to understand the concept.
As he's going to give a mashal. Kisha'adam mevin u'masig eza halacha b'mishnah or b'gemara. Here's a good example. Usually we think of mashal as a story. It's a parable. He's not giving you a story over here. He's just giving you a concrete example of what he's talking about. He says when your mind grasps any specific law or mishnah or gemara, something of divine wisdom, and he's using very concrete examples of divine wisdom, nothing esoteric or abstract. He's giving law or something from the Talmud, any statement. La'ashur al-burya, when he understands it completely. Harei sichloi taifes u'makif oisa v'gam sichloi melubash ba ba'isa sha. So your mind surrounds that idea by the very fact that now the thought is entering your brain. It's entering your mind. Now your mind is surrounding the idea, but now your mind itself is taking the form, taking the shape of that very idea. So we talk about being garbed, being clothed. We obviously don't mean clothing. We don't even mean dressed up in any sense of the word. We mean now your brain, your mind, your intellect has taken that form, taken that shape. Your mind, without anything in it, it just has potentiality. But now whenever you're putting any idea inside of your mind is now taking the form of the thing which went inside of it. So that means now your mind, the potential of your mind, is now garbed and framed. Maybe that is even the best word over here for clothed. It's framed by the idea which you grasped and understood. So there's a very, very intimate interaction between your mind and that idea. This law, this law is the wisdom and the will. Two ideas. It's the wisdom and the will of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What's deeper? What's a deeper part of somebody? His wisdom or his will?
I guess his will.
His will. So ultimately, when we say Chachma and Ratzon of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we mean any specific, definitive idea is HaKadosh Baruch Hu's wisdom. But within that wisdom that he imparts is also his will. So his will is his deeper purpose embedded within that specific framework of knowledge. So it's any halacha, any piece of Torah is the wisdom and the will of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Sha'ala Bertzaina, that went up in his mind, in his will, that he willed. Shekishayita in Ruvain Kach, and he's going to give an example in halacha. Truth of the matter is, I'm not even sure why he bothers, but he gives an example in halacha over here when Ruvain claims such and such. Derech Mashal, he's just giving an example. V'Shimon Kach v'Kach, and then Shimon claims otherwise, and they're having a dispute. Yeah, Hefzik Beinayim, the Kach v'Kach. So now they have a dispute between them, so such and such. Afin lo haya v'lo yiyah hadavar zeh la'olam, lavo l'mishpat. Even if this story, even if this law, as it's expressed in the story between Reuven and Shimon, even if it's never ever going to transpire. You know, many times we come across a law in the Talmud which seems very outlandish, or it seems so specific that we wonder what's the relevancy of it. And Tanya is saying, don't worry if it's ever going to happen. That's not the point. The point is that it's the wisdom and the will of God as expressed in this example of it. Still, even though it might not ever transpire in practical real life and it seems irrelevant, it seems like it can't be a part of our reality. Even though we would seem like some story, some law, which is so outlandish, so foreign, so irregular, that it can't be part of our reality, it can't become part of ourselves. He says, no, on the contrary. He says, since this is the will and the wisdom of God, Shem Yitun Zekach, that if this one will claim such, V'Zekach, and this one will claim otherwise, Yia Hefsek Kach, excuse me, I keep saying Hefsek, Yia Psak Kach, then the law will be so and so, such and such. Harekish Adam Yodei Omasik B'Sichlo Psak Zeh, Ke Halacha Ha'arucha, B'Mishnah O Gemara, O Poskim. When a person knows this law as it's defined in the, in the Talmud or in the legal text, and again we're talking about a law which is it's completely irrelevant. It's never going to happen, but it is the will of God. It is the wisdom of God. Hareza masig v'tofes u'makiv b'sichla ritzona v'chachmasa shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You now, by knowing that idea, understanding it, we're talking about only within the context of understanding, parenthetically. If you understand it, then now you're intimately connected to the wisdom and the will of God. Which God, mind you? Which mind? Which God? The God which we already described as being less machshava tfisa beh. He's the God who nobody can grasp. V'lo bertzona v'chachmasa, and his will and his wisdom can be grasped. However, that same God, which we describe as being impossible, being too great for us to grasp. Not him, not his will, and not his wisdom. Ki imbis labshusam b'halachas aruchas lefneinu. The only way we can is when they are defined within the halachas as they're presented to us. V'gam sichlo melubash behem. And when your mind is formed by them, v'hu yichud nifla, she'en yichud kamayhu, v'loi ke'erkoi nimtza klal, begashmias, lios la'achadim u'muyuchadim mamash, v'chol tzad v'pina. When a person then grasps these defined concepts of Torah law, or of Torah in the broader sense, but he's actually talking about Torah law. When you grasp these ideas and they form your mind at the moment, at the time that you understand them, then what's happening is the greatest yichud, the greatest unity. Yichud is a term which can be used Kabbalistically or it can be used, rationally. Yichud ultimately translates as a unity. The Kabbalists have this notion of a unification, but it's not just the provenance of the Kabbalists. It's what we do. That's what we do. We're in the business of unification. Maybe the Kabbalists know exactly how and specifically what, but ultimately what we're here to do is unify God's name. We're here to unify God's oneness, the entire cosmos. That's what we do. So what he's telling you here, the Tanya, is a very, very important idea, something which I think people think about. And he's telling you very emphatically that learning Torah is the greatest unity with God. And ultimately, he's not talking about this contextually, but ultimately it's the greatest, you bring the greatest unity to the cosmos through learning God's Torah. And God's Torah, just one second, God's Torah doesn't just mean the esoteric and the abstract. It means even the basic, seemingly irrelevant, forgive me for using this word, just want to get the point across, ridiculous, outlandish, absurd laws that we might find in the Talmud. And again, he's describing, I'm only using that contextually in the sense that it's never going to happen. And that seems to be what Tanya is saying. These laws might not ever happen. And we actually have examples of that in the Talmud. There are laws which the Gemara describes as, it's never going to happen. And people wonder when they're learning them, why are we doing this? The answer is that Tanya tells you right here that the greatest religious act that a man could possibly do is learning Torah. And it doesn't make a difference whether the Torah you're learning is something which will transpire in your life or anybody else's life for that matter. It doesn't make a difference if it's esoteric and abstract or very mundane. When the proverbial example of the ox goring the cow, and everybody wonders why anybody's talking about this, because we don't have cows, oxes, dogs people have, but cows and oxes, we don't have. Why are we learning this? The answer is, not only is there a reason to learn it, it's actually the greatest religious act that man could possibly do. I'm sorry.
No, I'm not confused, but it sounded like the way you're describing it, the achadim, yuchadim, mamish, as if it's, again, maybe an intellectual exercise unifying Hashem, but are we also referring to our bond, our connection with God?
Absolutely. I think I didn't explain that clearly, but he's more talking about our bond with Hashem as opposed to, I mentioned Hashem's name or whatever, just as a general idea of where the words unification is used. But of course, he is talking about, very specifically, our unification with God, our unity, our oneness with God, which he's going to actually elaborate on as we continue.
I'm just thinking as an afterthought, because you described the beginning of the chapter so well. Your mind becomes the shape of, or that your mind is surrounded by, and yet the concept is surrounding your mind. And if we're talking about godly things, it's like your mind is like unified with Hashem. Like it could get higher than that,
Again, when you learn deep ideas like this, I find it very helpful to attempt to use the language that he uses as opposed to drifting away into our own terms and what we're comfortable with, because you lose things in translation, like anybody who ever read something translated does. The more you translate the words, the farther you get from the true meaning of them. So it's very, very helpful just to keep clarity in your own minds, to attempt to use his words, his language, and not deviate too far from that. Obviously, you have to translate ideas into your own words, but you always want to come back to his language so that you know that you haven't strayed too far. But ultimately, he's absolutely saying that clearly. He's saying, "V'hu yichud." Let's go back inside the text. "V'hu yichud nifla." It's the greatest unity. She'ein yichud kamayo, that there is no unity like it. V'lei ka'erko, not qualitatively, not quantitatively. Nimsa klal begashmis. There is no such idea that is expressed in the physical world. Liyos la'achadim v'miyuchadim mamish b'chol tzad b'pina. There's nowhere in the physical world that you could have a unity where the two parts that are being unified are absolutely one and the same. Whenever you bring two things together, they don't become absolutely one. They can be mixed together to the point where you can discern how they're distinguishable. However, when we're talking about unity over here, we're talking about unity in the sense that it's one and the same, almost. Similar in concept to the way the Rambam describes Hashem's oneness. He says Hashem is one, but he's not one like any other oneness that we know. Similarly, over here, the Tanya is also saying that the unity that you have when you understand something is a unity that there is no other unity like this. I want to just point out parenthetically that what the Tanya is talking about is, in theory, anything that you know, not specifically Torah. He's talking about the way that the intellect interacts with concepts. It's not specifically it's not specific for a Jew's learning of Torah. Obviously, then ultimately, if I think about this tea, and it was a good tea, thank you, then I have unification with the tea. That's not really getting me anywhere. But when I'm understanding God's wisdom and God's will as it's defined, then I have a unity with that. Obviously, that's something much, much deeper. No, I'm good, thank you. B'zay smiley yisera gedayla v'nifla la'ein kates asher b'mitzvahs yediyas ha'torah v'asagasa ha'kol ha'mitzvahs ma'asiyas. What he's saying now is what we said before, is that it's incomparable, the greatness of the mitzvah of learning Torah compared to any other mitzvah that we have. We have 613, learning Torah is one of them, but it's incomparable, the difference in greatness between the act of learning Torah study, and doing any other mitzvah. We all know the Gemara in Maseches Megillah, which says it's greater to learn Torah than to save lives. The Gemara says that. So, but the Tanya is saying the same thing as well, that the unity that happens between the Jewish people and ultimately HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when we're learning Torah, is unfathomably greater than the unity that we have with HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence when we do any other mitzvah. The limit of Torah is greater than any other religious act. And even the mitzvahs, they're dependent on speech. So that's not so physical. I mean, okay, we shake a lulav, that's very physical, But when we're speaking, maybe we're praying, that's a little less physical, isn't it? Because it has to do with our speech, and speech is, the expression of our humanity. The answer is absolutely, but he's saying it's even greater than that. And you know what? The unity that we have from understanding God's precepts, laws, concepts, is even greater than the Talmud Torah itself when we're just reading it without understanding it. In other words, somebody might say, okay, I got you. Learning Torah study is so great, so I'm going to go and I'll read the Bible. Do you understand it? Well, not really. I like the way it sounds. It's very lyrical and it feels good. I feel religious. But the difference between saying the words from the Tanakh, which is a mitzvah, by the way, it's a mitzvah of Talmud Torah. If you say Tanakh without understanding it, you get a mitzvah of Talmud Torah. But the difference between just saying it and actually understanding it is that much greater. And that's why, obviously, Torah study is part and parcel with toiling. People talk about Torah study. Even Rabbi Aaron spoke about it today in the Shir in the morning, that Torah study comes with toil. Now, why is that? Because when somebody toils to understand something, that's what understanding is. When somebody just tells you something, that's not really grasping it. You might know it on the surface of your mind, but what he's describing here is a understanding that comes from grasping
So you're talking about
what you know.
learning from within,
Yeah.
as opposed to just sort of like being, like you said, being told.
We're just going through the motions, Yeah, absolutely.
Spoon-fed versus, racking your brains.
It's like, it's also the idea of, the way I see it is it's in terms intellectual independence. In other words, if someone is constantly telling you how to do things without a deeper understanding of why, then when they're not around to do it, to tell you,
for sure.
then you won't have a basis for knowing what to do.
Mm-hmm. Your skills are that much more developed. You have that much more freedom.
Just
Absolutely.
this whole idea of the dependency, independence, and knowing how to act and behave, especially like a Jew, without having to necessarily watch everybody else do what they're doing.
To have it an intimate part of yourself. That's really what he's talking about. Absolutely. Every mitzvah that you do using your mouth or your body, physical action. HaKadosh Baruch Hu malbish as a nefesh u'makifa or Hashem eirosh v'ad ragla. HaKadosh Baruch Hu garbs your soul and surrounds it in the light of Hashem from the top of your head to the bottom of your feet. When you do a mitzvah, you're surrounded in a divine light, the Or Makif. And that's great. Sounds great. This will be Yediyas HaTorah, but understanding Torah, Milvad Sha'aseichel Melubash B'chachmas Hashem, not only that your mind is now garbed in the wisdom of Hashem, like he spoke before. Hinegam Chachmas Hashem Bekirbo. The wisdom of Hashem actually enters within you. Again, he's not talking about anything so heebie-jeebie. He's just talking about you got it in your brain. So beforehand, God's light surrounded you. You did the mitzvah. And now you have this spiritual light which surrounds you. But is there anything inside of you? He's telling you no. And you might feel very good. But I don't know if that's spirituality. Could be. But that he's telling you that the spiritual light, power, energy is around you. It's not within. When you learn Torah, then when the Torah enters your mind and it becomes grasped in your mind like he described before, then what happens? Aside from the fact that your mind is garbed in the wisdom of Hashem, but the wisdom of Hashem enters inside of you. That wisdom of Hashem which your mind realizes, grasps, and surrounds within the mind. As much as you're able to grasp. You can't grasp the infinite. You can grasp it. But the definitive amount of wisdom of God that you can grasp, you've grasped. To understand from the wisdom of the Torah, each man depending on his intellect, and his capacity to know, and his level, his realization in all the different levels of Torah. Pardis is an acronym for Pshat, Remez, Drush, Sod, simple understanding, and so on and so forth until you reach the hidden understanding. So everybody's going to obviously realize and be connected to the Torah in a deeper and deeper way, everybody on their level, but everybody on their level with the Torah that they are grasping has this intimate connection, and it's from within, it's not just without. Is it clear? You speak English?
Yeah.
You do? So you understand? Is it what? You're Hebrew speaker native or French?
I'm French.
French. My
from
wife.
Canada, actually.
You're from Montreal.
Small part of Canada.
Hmm.
But in Canada, we understand both languages.
Either both or neither. Depending on who you ask. My wife is French and she's from Paris. That's why I feel like, I can talk like that to you. I apologize. But it's clear, it's good. Yeah?
Parlez-vous anglais?
Just a bit. I don't speak English, I speak
There's
Yeshivish.
something I thought when you were talking earlier and asking, when you work it out, it's in your guts. Because then the word kirbo, it means your whole inside, but still, you could,
No, when we go through the learning process, there are things that we feel on the surface of our minds, and there's other things which we actually, like you said, we own it. It's part and parcel of us. And that's what he's describing, that intimate understanding. And because the knowledge of the Torah, and because with the knowledge of the Torah then becomes garbed in the soul of the man, v'sichlo in his mind, umukefes b'sochem, and is surrounded from within them. L'chein nikris b'shem lechem umazayin hanefesh. That's why the Torah, in many, many places in Scripture, in the Talmud, is described as being the bread, the food for the soul. Why is that? Obviously, it's just a mushel. It's not bread. It's certainly not a baguette. You have real baguettes in Montreal?
It's the nutrients. It's where the nourishment is coming.
Just like the physical food and bread sustains the body, when the food enters the body, the kirba mamash and into your innards mamash. The nepach sham lios dam ubasar kibsarai, and that food which is ingested is transformed to be part of your very system, your blood and your flesh. Va'aza yichye v'yiskayim, and through that process you live and are sustained. Kach b'yediyas HaTorah, so too with the knowledge of the Torah, v'hasagasa b'nefesh ha'adam, and the knowledge of it and the realization of it in the soul of the person. Shalom the Hativ B'iyun Sichlo, who learns it well, deeply, with his mind. And again, he's emphasizing this idea. It shouldn't be misconstrued. He's not just talking about simple Torah study. He's talking about where really you work hard. You understand it deeply. Ad nitfeses b'sichlo, until it's grasped. Like you said, you own it, but your mind owns it. Umisachedes imo, and becomes one with you. V'hayu la'achadim, and they become one. Your mind and that Torah becomes one. Nasa mazoin lanefesh, v'chayim bekirba mechaye hachayim ein soif baruchu. That Torah becomes the sustenance of your soul, and the life from within it gives you life from the life of the eternal, infinite God. And it becomes one within you. That's what he's saying. Because if you think about it, I don't know if I have the right words to explain it, but when you think about an empty mind, and you think about how you grasp an idea within your mind now has something. Your mind before was empty. It wasn't alive. It was like a body who hasn't eaten for a while. You feel very weak. When your mind now has an idea in it, and it incorporated that idea within it, your mind just grew. Your mind is now alive. Now, what is that life that your mind has? The answer is it's the life of the wisdom of God Himself. And that became one with you. This is what it says in the pasuk, the Torah is within my innards.
Stomach, right?
Yeah, the stomach or the innards, yeah. Intestines, probably, yeah, that's probably more accurate. Like it says in the Eitz Chaim, that's the book written by Rabbi Chaim Vital, the student of the Arizal, Shar, Mem Daled, Paragimel, Shalavushe HaNeshamis Began Eden, the clothing for the souls in the Garden of Eden. Heina mitzvahs. We have a soul, but our soul is floating around in the Garden of Eden, and the only way that it has clothes, and what does it mean, clothes? It means honor. Our clothes, the Talmud describes as being the expression of our honor. A king wears clothes, which expresses his station, so on and so forth. A person's clothes express the honor. So your soul is going to be wearing your mitzvahs in the Garden of Eden. What that means is that your soul will express its honor and find its place through the doing of the mitzvahs. That's what it will have in the Garden of Eden. V'Torah hi ha'mazoin. But what is the Torah that you've learned in this world? It's not going to be the outward expression of your soul's stature and station. Rather, more intimately, the Torah will be the food for the souls. She'asku b'olam hazeh, that we're involved with it in this world. The Torah l'shma, with Torah for its own sake. Now it's interesting, you all of a sudden stuck in the word for its own sake. You didn't say that before. And this is obviously, the idea of Torah l'shma and what it means. I don't know if you've come across it, but it's a lengthy disputed discussion. It's very, we can't get into it at length or cover it completely now. But what I would suggest, and I'm not sure, I'm not a Lubavitcher, by the way, so I'm not sure how in Lubavitch they learned this. But I would suggest that what he means here by Torah L'Shma, and why he's sticking it in right now, is exactly the way his contemporary, Reb Chaim Volozhin, who was from the Litvish school, as opposed to the Chabad school. So he describes Torah L'Shma as being what? As learning Torah in order to understand it. When somebody learns Torah well, because he wants to know it, he just did Torah L'Shma. He strips it of all its confusing, the possibly confusing idea of how pure you have to be, or how spiritual you have to be. And he says, no, learning Torah L'Shma means you're learning it because you want to know. And how's that expressed? Obviously, like we discussed before, where you're working hard because you want to know it. And why do you want to know it? I don't know. I don't really know why I want to know it. I just want to know it, And that's the same thing that the Tanya is really saying here. He's describing learning Torah superficially. And you might want to learn Torah superficially. Why? Because it's a spiritual act. And you want to be religious. And that's wonderful. That you could do even superficially. Somebody just, somebody's tired and wants to do a spiritual act, and they'll just sit down with some Tehillim and read it. That's beautiful. It's beautiful. That's a mitzvah of learning Torah. Tehillim is part of Torah. Say, I don't understand anything. That's great. You're learning Torah. Keep doing it. But that wouldn't be Torah L'Shma. You know why? Because do you really want to know it? The answer is absolutely not. I'm just reading it. So you don't want to know it. So it's not the level of Torah that he's describing. So when the Tanya says, when your mind is grasping the Torah, that means clearly you worked hard to understand it. You really got it. That means you learned Torah L'Shma. And that's why he sticks it in over here. That's the way that I understand it. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, there was one point in my life that when I barely knew my Aleph base. Anyway, I used to, if I went to shul, I would read the Hebrew, and then if I wanted to understand, I would read the English. But I always liked reading the Hebrew, and I understood it. So someone had told me that you're even if you don't know what you're saying, if you say it in Hebrew, it counts. Whether it's Shemona Esrei or even just the Torah portion. But when I tried to tell this to other people, they said, that I don't understand it, but that it's still, they don't. In other words, that they didn't get. That how could you say you're reading something or doing something when you don't understand what you're reading? So how does that fit into this discussion?
Well, you're discussing prayer. I was discussing Torah study, which, for me, I'm not even going to tell you anything. I'll just talk about my own feelings to it. I could theoretically learn Torah without understanding it. I get that. For me to pray with that understanding is very, very hard.
Yeah.
It's very, very hard because we want the prayer to come out of our heart. One second, I'm going to get to it. We want the prayer to come out of our heart. And sometimes it's very hard to read something, even when you understand it, and have it come out of your heart. When you don't understand, it's that much more difficult. However, that being said, the truth is, now I'm just going to contrast it. For me, it's easier to pray without understanding than to learn without understanding. And you know why? Is because when I learn, I really want to know. It's very, very hard for me to learn without knowing. Very, very, very difficult. For me to just read is just, I'd have to force myself because I really want to know. And I feel like I'm shutting off my brain a little bit. I'd rather read one sentence and understand it than read a whole page and not. But when it comes to prayer, it's really the contrary, because I could sit and read Tehillim, and Tehillim is hard, the words are hard, I don't understand so much what I'm saying. But it's just a vehicle
That's what the
that allows, the words sometimes is a perfect vehicle that allows our hearts to open up. And somehow, as we're just saying the words, all of a sudden our hearts are opening up and connecting to the words, and you wonder, how's it even possible? I don't know what I'm saying. But that's the answer. The Hebrew words that were invented as the vehicle for prayer by King David or by the men of the Great Assembly, they created the perfect medium for us to open up our hearts. And that is why prayer, on the contrary, I think more Jews learn and understand it than pray and understand. I think there's plenty of Jews just saying the prayers, not understanding it. And I think they mean it, because I think it opens up their heart. I think that's part of the magic of Hebrew prayer. But on the other hand, I think people really have to do both. Once you brought it up, I think people have to do both. I think that sometimes you have to pray, trying to understand it. I have students, a lot of students who can't read Hebrew, and they tell me they try to pray in Hebrew. It takes them like an hour, and it's killing them. They try to do it, and people tell them, I say, that's ridiculous. You can't last. You can't pray like that every day. I said, just read the English. And you're allowed to read the English, 100%. Just read the English. The whole prayer is no problem.
Well, maybe they should practice.
So that's what I tell them. I said, but please take one blessing or one part of the Psalms, during Psuki, there's the introductory, and say that in Hebrew, and just try to understand a little bit. Just pick it apart. And that's it. Say that, and you'll build from there. You'll grow from there, because obviously these things have to work in tandem. We obviously want to eventually, all of us want to pray in Hebrew and understand it and be able to mean it. What do you want to say?
Yes, and my point is a little off point, because that's what I do. And so if you don't want to address it, it's fine. But so I'll just tell you. So I'm thinking about Elu Devarim, Sheila, and Shihor. These are the things that are without measure, and the mitzvot, and the last line, the Talmud Torah K'neged Kolam, which always was problematic for me, because I never could understand. Well, yes, based on the conversation here, although you didn't say it, one could infer that if one studies and learns and makes it part of yourself, it will move you to do the mitzvot. Is that a connection?
Oh, absolutely. If somebody studies and it doesn't move them to serve God better, the person has a problem. But we're not up to there. I think you still have another 50 chapters left. He's only in the first stages of of the spiritual endeavor. It's a great journey. But he's just at the beginning, but he's describing this is the most important step.
There's maybe a little bit of hint to what you're saying, and I'm not sure he mentions it, but maybe in between the lines, when he talks about the Mabusha and Neshamos Beganei and the mitzvahs, I always imagined that a mitzvah is connected one of the limbs. So maybe I'm enlightening or putting energy into a particular limb. He sounds like it's the whole body, but whereas Torah is for the whole neshama. So the difference, how is it connected kulam? How does it affect my whole being, as opposed to a mitzvah, which I'm assuming may only affect or majorly affects one limb, whereas Torah affects the entire body. That helps you.
Well, a body ultimately is the garb of the soul. You have a soul and you have a body, and if one mitzvah is going to be connected, one of the limbs, so you're going to have 613 limbs, like the Talmud tells us that it's 248 mitzvahs essay, which are for the sinews, and 365 lysis for the limbs, the opposite. The opposite. And ultimately the Talmud Torah, which he's describing, is part of the 613. So it's really connected a limb as well. But the deep learning of the Torah, which he's talking about in this chapter, is for the soul, which is garbed by your body. So just like the mitzvahs garb your soul in Gan Eden, your body is garbing your soul here as well. So it is a corollary. Let's continue. And Lishma is in order to connect your soul to God. Right, so he describes what is Lishma, connecting your soul to God. Now, how do you do that? The answer is Al Yedei Hasagas Torah, by knowing Torah. That's how you connect your soul to God. It's not that you're learning as a medium for something else. This is what's very important. Learning Torah deeply is not to get you elsewhere. There it is. It's right there. That's the connection to God. Whether you always feel it or not is already a whole other conversation. But that's what he's describing here. Torah Lishma is the knowing of the Torah is Torah Lishma. Creates Chayim. Mahamazon and the fuel, the sustenance, he bechinas ar pnimi. Right before he spoke about the ar makif. The ar makif was the ar that God gave you during your doing of a mitzvah. And he described the ar Torah as being going inside of your mind. So the sustenance of your soul, which is the Torah, that is likened to the ar pnimi, the light which goes from within. V'alavushim b'chinas makifin, and the lavush, which is the mitzvahs, garments, that is the ar makif. L'chein, and again, ar pnim and ar makif are descriptions of God's relationship and presence to this world. They're terms which describe God's presence here. But from our side of the fence, the things that we do are the very things which bring those revelations of divine light, whether they're the ar makif or the ar pnimi, the light which surrounds or the light which enters. Those happen through our different forms of divine service, Torah or mitzvahs. Therefore it says in the Mishnah, Shatam Torah Shakal Keneged Kol mitzvahs, the Torah is equal to all of the mitzvahs. Levisha mitzvahs ein levushin levad. The mitzvahs are solely, merely, only garments. VaTorah hi mazayin. But the Torah itself is the inner sustenance. V'gam levush lenefesh. It's also the sustenance, and it's also a garment for the soul, because the Torah is within and without. Like he described, the mind brings the idea within it, and then the mind is also surrounded by it. Those two things are taking place when somebody's conceptualizing something. And again, if you close your eyes, I think you could actually feel this happening within your own brain. And he's saying, so therefore the Torah itself is ar makif and ar pnimi, which not only is it qualitatively better, it's even quantitatively better as well. The soul, the intellectual soul, that's the highest level of soul. Right? There's a nefesh ruach and neshama. Nefesh hamaskeles is the neshama. That it's garbed with the Torah when it is involved with understanding it. For sure, when you then express this concept with your mouth, with the wind, with your spirit from with your mouth, nasa bechinas ar makif, then it's for sure an ar makif, because then not only are you understanding the Torah, but then you're bringing the Torah from to outside, and then you're surrounded with the Torah itself. But ultimately, I think we understand that Parakeh is describing the greatness of Torah. He's describing the unique place of Torah study within the Jewish people. It reigns supreme. It is the greatest. Again, it's the greatest religious act you can do, which I think is I think it's something which to ponder. I mean, I don't think we feel that. Let's put it. I don't know. I'm speaking for myself. I don't know if we feel that. I think sometimes we feel that prayer is more spiritual. I think we feel maybe going to immerse ourselves in a mikveh is more spiritual. Maybe if we feel like we're repenting, it's more spiritual. Maybe if we're saying whatever it is that we do, sometimes we feel more spiritual, and that could very well be. He didn't discuss feelings here. Maybe the feeling of spirituality is not the greatest expression of spirituality, but he's describing that the greatest spiritual act that a man can do, or woman, is to study and understand Torah. That's what he's saying over here. Yeah, go ahead.
I learned about the Rosh, the Noni, and the Sadiq levels. Now, anyone at any level can, when they study Torah and seek to understand, can be enclosed in Torah and and wrapped in God. So it's regardless of level. It is the intention, the focus, and the desire to learn Torah and to understand it. So a person can do that at any level.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, and then my other part of that question is, where's the animal soul doing all this?
Excuse me?
The animal soul. If we're engaging our godly soul, what's happening with the animal soul while we're studying Torah and
It's a great question. You have another 40 chapters to discuss it.
Oh, okay.
I would almost say that's the most important focus of his book, is your question. I'm not an expert in his book, not even close. Don't claim to be. I didn't even finish the whole book this year, so I can't even say that I remember that it's the focus. But from the learning of the Tanya that I've done this year, it seems to be the main focus of what he wants to achieve, is to describe how to relate to what you just raised. But simply put, the answer is that the animal soul is forgotten. When you're engaged in religious activity, your animal soul is put behind you. Consequently, then your life, the main force of your life is not the animal soul, and has no influence on you at that moment. And at that moment, you're absolutely righteous. It's like you don't even have an animal soul. That's what the Tanya would say, again, succinctly, but he addresses it for the next 40 chapters. All right, thank you for this opportunity.
Oh.